Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Howl About It. This is the show where we celebrate the indie gaming scene and explore the heart and soul behind it. In the coming weeks, we'll have such developers as Zan, creator of Head on stream to talk to us, and then sometime in February, we'll have composer John S. Weekly, better known as Primeval, to talk to us about his music career. But before we bring out our first guest, I do want to make one announcement. So, as some of you may be aware of, Kaiser from Night Dive Studios, Samuel Villarreal, was recently a victim to a natural disaster. A tornado came through and ripped up his home. And he's got a GoFundMe here. He's trying to recover from that damage. But yeah, he was actually planning to be our first guest for this segment, and then that happened. So all of our thoughts go out to you, Kaiser, and we hope you make a quick recovery. But back to today's topic. If everyone please welcome the creator of CULTIC, Jasozz. Hello, Jasozz.
Hey, how's it going?
So, in case people weren't aware of who you are, could you tell us a bit about yourself and what CULTIC is?
Sure. So my name is Jason Smith. I run, well, I guess am Jasozz Games is my little studio, and I made the crunchy retro shooter CULTIC, which is kind of a retro shooter version of Resident Evil 4, more or less, with a lot of influences from other build engine titles, and it is one that Wesley has been speedrunning quite a bit, and so we kind of met through that. So yeah, happy to be here.
All right, and I have, so like we talked about before stream, I have 15 questions here that I'm going to ask Jasozz. Some are directed at like general game development. Some are about CULTIC, and there's just some general ones that I'm going to ask pretty much any guest that I'm going to have. But to start you off with an easy one, since CULTIC was developed on Unity, what's the one thing you wish you had learned sooner when starting in Unity?
I wish honestly that I had gotten a better level design tool set together before jumping, because Unity really doesn't have any tools built in for like building levels at all. You've got like Pro Builder, which is okay for gray boxing, but it's kind of a huge mess when it comes to texturing, and it's a destructive modeling, so it's pretty hard to do stuff like carving doors and windows and stuff like that. So I wound up using a plugin called Real-Time CSG, which allows you to do brushed base map building like directly in Unity, but it's no longer being developed, and it's super clunky. And I mean, it's great for what it is, but I really wish that I would have found a better level design tool set, whether that was working with an external editor like Trench Broom, like some people enjoy, but I really like to work directly in the editor. So I feel like for the entirety of the project, level design has always been an extremely tedious process because of how clunky Real-Time CSG is, and since it can't do complex geometry like terrain and tunnels and stuff like that, I still have to do all that in Blender by hand, and then so you're working in like two different softwares to make one map, and I don't know, that's always been a huge pain. So if I were to do a game like this again, it would be really nice to find a much more cohesive and complete set of tools for building maps.
So it doesn't have anything like tile sets or anything along those lines?
There's a decent amount of tool sets for 2D map building, like 2D tile sets. Those are fairly common, but for trying to do kind of maps that you might see in like a build engine game or Quake, kind of these lower poly brush based maps, or even like like a Source game built in the Hammer that are Something like the Hammer Editor would have been phenomenal, but you're really limited to options there. For a while, there was somebody working on a hot loader for Trench Broom in Unity, where you could like as soon as you saved your map, it would automatically update everything you had imported into Unity. But it never got released, and I tried to reach out to the person that was working on it, and never heard back from them. So that was too bad. I was really hoping that was going to pan out.
Yeah, that sounds really useful. So, our next question: what came first in CULTIC's design? Did you have a story that you wanted to tell, a particular gameplay style? Tell us about the early concept stage of your game.
So, CULTIC was born as kind of a story concept a really long time ago, like probably, oh gosh, probably when I was in high school still, which I wanted to make kind of a this game about a like a guy who goes to like investigate some uh some conspiracy or some some nefarious thing, and he gets killed at the beginning of the game, and then mysteriously gets brought back to life, and that was just kind of like this hook for a story that I wanted to explore in a game. But at the time that I came up with it, I was still just using like Game Maker way back then, so I had never touched 3D at all. And this wasn't a game that I felt I could make in a 2D space. Like I really wanted it to be a retro shooter, like like the ones I had played growing up, Dark Forces and Dark Forces 2 and Blood and Duke 3D and so on. So I just never started on it because I was like, well, I don't know how to do 3D. So it just kind of like I tried to adapt the concept into other games, like the Hemoglobin Project, which was an old project of mine. I kind of tried to adapt it, but the first stab at that was 2D top down, and it really didn't feel right. And then I tried it again in 3D, but my 3D art was so rudimentary back then, and the code was a mess, and the whole thing just didn't really feel right. It wasn't really living up to this game that I had hyped up in my own head. So I gave up on that too, and it really didn't come to fruition until the end of 2020, when I started working on those sprite renders, where I was just like messing around with trying to create a pipeline of turning a 3D model into a 2D sprite. And just those couple of test sprites I did with the old lever action model and the old hand model really seemed to resonate with people on Twitter. I think at the time, I only had like maybe a couple hundred followers on Twitter, and so if I posted anything game dev related, I would get like you get like 10 likes out of it. And these sprites that I was posting were suddenly getting like 500 to 700 likes and getting retweeted a bunch, and I was like, oh man, like maybe this is the art style I need to finally start on CULTIC. But yeah, no, it just started as this kind of vague story idea that kind of came from just all these other games I had played, and wanted to kind of boil elements of their story down. But I'm not much of a writer, so it was kind of just, after that, it was just kind of slapdash stuff together. As you go along, you get like a random idea for the story, and you're like, oh, that would be cool. Let's work that into this map and see how it feels. And then a couple years later, we have CULTIC Chapter 1.
Yeah, there's a few things that you had mentioned that actually will play into some later questions that I have, so we'll get back to those. But our next question: what was going through your mind when CULTIC became a breakout success, and do you think you'll be able to deliver that same response with Chapter 2?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. See, like I always say that like I was praying for like very positive as far as review scores go. I was like, I feel like if I can get to that 80% positive rate, then that will be like a dream come true. So to see, the game just a few days after launch hit overwhelmingly positive, which you have to have which has to be 95% positive or greater, and at least 500 reviews. And so to hit that in just a short amount of time, I was like, that blew me away. And the whole thing was just really surreal, because I've been just like a hobby game dev for pretty much my whole life since I was a kid. And so I've never released anything. I've never really had any projects that people were watching. I never really had any like public following. And so, to have CULTIC go from something that was just me messing around with turning models into sprites one weekend, and then a couple of months later, I've got 3D Realms picking up the project, and then all this hype building behind it, and getting tens of thousands of wish lists it was really strange, and a lot of that imposter syndrome was pretty rough. Of like how do you deliver on this, especially when I've never released a game before. So it was definitely a huge sigh of relief that it was received positively, and that it performed pretty well in the at least in the genre. So no, it was exciting. It's still kind of hard to believe. And as far as chapter 2 goes, I think that I mean I hope it'll be received well. I feel like I've taken a lot of the lessons and a lot of the criticisms from chapter 1 and tried to work them into creating an experience that will improve on chapter 1, going back and cleaning up some placeholder things and some old systems that weren't working well, and trying to ramp up the variety in the maps, and which is some things that people were really looking forward to. And then just the fact that the story and the experience will be more complete at that point. So there's like, I mean, the game still has like 200,000 or so outstanding wish lists of people who are waiting for one reason or another. And I know a lot of those are people who are waiting for the second chapter to come out. They, when you go and look at the game on Steam, and they see that it's chapter 1, and they prefer to wait for the whole thing to come out. I've gotten a lot of folks that have said that. So I'm hoping that will get those folks on board. So yeah, I mean, hopefully numbers wise, it'll be it'll be successful. That would be great, because I would love to keep doing game development. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I was hooked on the game since like the earliest demo that you released. Like I was even speedrunning that, doing 100% routing. So yeah, in fact the legacy run is still up on my YouTube. But
yeah, it was pretty surprising how many downloads the original demo got. I was definitely not expecting their very first Realms Deep that it got showed off in it would have been 2021. I was still working on the game part-time, just in my spare time. I still had a regular full-time job, and the response to like the demo trailer and then the demo releasing, there was so overwhelming. Like it was crazy. And that's kind of where 3D Realms and I we started chatting, and I was like, well, maybe we need to look into what it's going to take to get me on this full time, because like there's so much hype behind it now that I don't think I can keep working on it just in my spare time, because it would take years to finish it at that rate. So it was nice to kind of have that momentum be the push that finally got me to take the risk and take the leap of quitting a full-time job that had been supporting me, to work on this kind of a gamble. So that's another reason I'm very glad that it paid off, because otherwise that would have been financially devastating to have quit my full-time career to work on that. So that's I'm very thankful that panned out.
Yeah. And I'm sure all the fans appreciate you willing to take that risk. So our next question: what was your greatest challenge to overcome when developing CULTIC?
I would say probably getting to grips with long form level design. Because pretty much everything I'd worked on before CULTIC had been really small game dev projects. Lots of like my 3D stuff had mostly been like roguelites, were I was using like dungeon generation, so I was only building small set pieces and then letting an algorithm stitch them together. Or they were such conceptual level games that all they ever got done was just like a test room with some enemies, and so building long point A to point B levels that have to have like pathing and set pieces, and like being able to have like a little bit of exploration and freedom, that was all new to me. And you can really see like just going from the original Realms Deep 2021 demo to the 2022 demo, you can see just like how much I learned and how much level design evolved just in that short time. Because when you go from doing game dev as a hobby, working on it like a few hours a week to doing it full time, suddenly you're learning at like such an exponential rate. And I
Mhm.
guess in addition to the level design, what's really challenging when you go from doing something as a hobby to doing it full time is that you're improving at such a rate that your old work starts to stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Like in every avenue, especially when you're a solo dev, like every model you make is a little bit better than the last one. And so by after a year of making models for CULTIC, suddenly the models that I had made in 2020 were starting to look really bad by comparison to the new stuff
Mhm.
I was making. And I was learning more about what worked and what didn't work with the music and with the audio design and with the color palette. And so you're kind of trying to keep making these decisions of like, well, I just made a breakthrough with audio design where I discovered that if I do this, it actually sounds a lot better. So do I go back and redo all of these old assets? And with the art, I did that twice of like, oh, I just found a new way to render the sprites that cleans up a whole lot of the aliasing that was making them difficult to read before. So like, do I go back and re-render all of these sprites now, or every time you go back and refactor a whole bunch of code because you figured out a much cleaner way to do something? It's like, well, all of the enemies use this old legacy code, so do I go back and rewrite all of that code? And that just happens over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And that's the trouble with a project like CULTIC that's taking so long to finish, is there's so much opportunity for that to happen.
Mhm.
Even now, like working on chapter 2, with the maps, since I have so much more time to work on everything, I've been spending a lot more time trying to make the maps more interesting and have more variety and recycle assets less. But
Mhm.
now if you go back and look at chapter 1 maps in comparison to chapter 2 maps, now chapter 1 feels to me like the maps don't feel very good anymore. And so then it's like, well, do you go back and try to polish those up, or but at that point, these are maps that people already know and love. And so you don't want to like ruin what people like about the game either. So hey, that's just a really tough challenge
Mhm.
to determine, like, when is it worth going back and applying lessons you've learned to old development, and when is it better to just leave it alone and save it for your next project.
Right. So, I definitely can relate to that in some sense. Like, I really like character design. So in like Skyrim, I would often go back and re-edit a character, their face, change a hairstyle or this, or clean up a chin, or
Hmm.
stuff like that. So I definitely feel that.
Yeah.
So our next question, regarding Cultic's movement, was this born out of there being a lack of it in retro FPS games, or were they inspired by more modern games such as like FromSoft titles?
um I would say it's kind of a little bit of both. I mean, like having the movement be very like concise and snappy, like retro shooters, just where your animations aren't really tied to, or sorry, your movement isn't really tied to animations, so you don't have that kind of like sloppy movement feel that you get with games like Red Dead Redemption 2, where
Mm-hmm.
like everything is tied to an animation, and so it's hard to make small, precise movements. So it's like one part of it's just wanting to have clean, bouncy, easy movement, just like build shooters or Doom or whatever. But also taking things that we have found in modern game design that make for satisfying movement, like being able to slide and being able to somersault and being able to dash. Like these are all things that have become prevalent in modern games because they feel good to do and they're fun for traversal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just kind of like marrying those two, trying to bring a few things that I really like being able to do like the drop roll. I always really enjoyed that in Dying Light, of being able to time that and just avoid a little bit of damage by doing a badass somersault when you hit the ground.
Yeah.
And of course there's a myriad of games that allow you to slide, and I always enjoy being able to slide in a game. But I don't like when the slide redirects with the camera. So like if you're sliding and you turn, your slide also turns.
Oh yeah.
And so that was something I didn't want. So when you slide, it locks the direction in, but then you're able to like look around and shoot at enemies and stuff like that without affecting the direction of your slide, just because it feels cleaner to me personally that way. So yeah, I mean, like a lot of things with Cultic's design, it was a lot of just Like what kind of movement have I enjoyed from the games that I've played, and
Mhm.
how can I try to bring those systems together? So that was really what informed, I think, a lot of the movement design was just, what has felt good in other games that I've played. I should probably put that in my game too.
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing a lot of it now in the. I hate the term, but we're gonna use that. I'm gonna say it anyway. The boomer shooter. Um,
Hmm.
with I think this absolute silliest example was Fashion Police Squad, where he has a belt that he used to swing around.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the genre's extremely movement heavy right now. And
Mhm.
actually that's kind of been something really interesting that was developing while I was working on CULTIC, because like during the time I was working on CULTIC, you had games like Ultra Kill that are getting that
Mhm.
extremely popular, and like Doom Eternal getting extremely popular, and all of these are um, these games that are pushing this movement loop that's just like go 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 all the time. Like
Mhm.
you always got to be zipping and dashing and dodging and moving around, and it was kind of tough because like for me personally, that movement, that gameplay style doesn't click with me. The always being on the go.
Right.
And so but I was sitting here watching all of these games get extremely popular while having that kind of movement. And so it was kind of tough to, and that decision you make of like, well, do I adjust my vision of my game to try to accommodate this trend that's clearly going to be a big deal,
Mhm.
or do I keep it more true to the vision for the game, which was closer to like, like Resident Evil 4, being a little slower and more tactical.
Mhm.
And the answer wound up being kind of in Cultic's movement, like you mentioned, that there are movement options and exploits that let you play the game like like a crackhead and just like zoom around all over the place and build up tons of speed. um, and so just giving people the tools to play the game that way if they want, but you don't have to. Like the game is still designed to be played a little bit more slower, like slow paced.
Mhm.
But people, it's almost like if you watch like four different people play Cultic, you're gonna see like four wildly different play styles, and which is cool. It's really cool to see how people kind of bend the rules of this thing you designed. But yeah, no, that was a struggle too of like and I'm glad in the end I didn't wind up speeding up the gameplay, mainly because like I'm not good at those kind of games, so I feel like it wouldn't have really been within my purview to try to make a game like that, being somebody who was terrible at them.
Okay. Next question is: we know about the artifacts being cut from the game, but were there any other cut content that you would like to share? Any enemies or weapons that didn't make it into the final game?
Um, by artifacts, you mean like the ability system and
Right.
okay. Yeah, so the ability system was the big one that didn't make the cut. And to keep it short for those who aren't aware, Cultic was originally going to have some like Bioshock-esque kind of abilities, like telekinesis and being able to like mind control enemies and stuff like that. But because Cultic's gameplay and specifically the time to kill on each enemy is so fast,
Mhm.
the powers felt really gimmicky. Like there's really no reason to like telekinetically pick something up and throw it at an enemy when you can just shoot them in the head twice and they're dead.
Right.
So they didn't really feel like they had a good place in the game, and so they ultimately got cut. Um, I would say other than that, the biggest thing um, that got cut, that wasn't actually ever in the game but got cut in the conceptual phase, was a lot of the like narrative elements, because the game originally was going to um I must have been playing like Shadows of the Damned or the Shadow Warrior remake around the time that I came up with this, but I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if the player like, whenever this big, otherworldly supernatural being came into our world, it would be so cool if like, some kind of like demonic entity like jumped into the player and they had kind of this like demonic sidekick that like spoke in their head. Um but it quickly became apparent that since I can't write worth a damn, it was not going to work out. And just doing narrative stuff in general. Then you get into like, well, now I'm gonna have to find like voice actors for this stuff, and I'm gonna have to make sure that the writing stays consistent and stays relevant, and that you pace that content out well. And all of this stuff was like, I don't know how to do any of that, and the scope is gonna increase dramatically if I do. So there was a lot of like story elements like that got cut out in favor of a much cleaner cut, kind of down to earth storyline. And um and so that was probably the biggest one, was like the tone of the game and the way that the narrative was going to be delivered changed a lot, to the point where now it's kind of just like it's almost all environmental storytelling, and just what you choose to pick up and look at in the environment, and what notes you choose to read. But other than that, it's very hands off. And I'm really glad that I went that route, because I don't think I would have had the resources to do it the way I originally imagined it. And that's kind of another reason why like the abilities got cut, was when you introduce a system like that, you kind of have to like tutorialize it, and you have to like explain to the player why you have these abilities. And
Yeah.
like in BioShock, when you take your first your first plasmid, and your guy's this whole cutscene of injecting himself and all the effects, and the like, oh my god, what's going on? And like that's all stuff that you have to establish. And I didn't want to do any of that. So I was like, I don't think this system's going to work. Like, I think this game works a lot better as just a much cleaner design and cleaner storytelling. So that was probably the other major thing that got cut, was like a bunch of narrative stuff that I just didn't really feel like I had the chops for.
Was thinking back to that Shadow Warrior game, I don't think I would have wanted an obnoxious voice in my head.
Yeah, it was definitely, I had definitely kind of slated it out to be a little more of like a kind of like that in Shadows of the Damned, where you have kind of this like this goofy little like demon voice in your head, and it's like the only reason the player's alive is because this demonic entity tried to take over their body, but they weren't dead yet. And I was like, I decided not to pursue that that angle in the end.
Yeah, now it's what's the catchphrase? You died, so what?
Yeah. Some of that old tone is apparent in the like the Steam, the old Steam descriptions and stuff, when the game kind of had a bit more of a a goofy attitude to it. But I guess another thing that was kind of cut, and if you play through the oldest demos of the game, CULTIC used to be a lot slower paced and a lot more like horror focused, and a lot of the combat was very like up close. Like there really wasn't much long range combat at all. The map design was much smaller and much tighter. But as the game continued development, I wound up wanting to do a lot more with the gunplay, wanting to introduce a lot more like range and different ways to approach enemy encounters. And when your design is that up close and personal, it's really hard to do a lot of variety like that. Like if you're in a small room and all of your enemies die in a couple shots, then you're just going to run in and blast them with the Sten or whatever. Like there's not a whole bunch of room for experimentation. So I wound up opening up the level design a whole bunch, which is apparent if you go from like the Realms Deep 2021 demo to the Next Fest 2022 demo. When I redesigned the first map, it went from being this really, really tight claustrophobic map to being this really wide open space. And there was a lot of pushback on that initially, just because, people really enjoyed the original demo. And so I really had to fight that battle of like, just trust me, like just stick with it. And I think in the end, it was the right call for being able to make the game as open-ended as it is. It would have been really tough if I had stuck with the slower paced, tighter focused horror game, because I think someday I'd like to make an actual dedicated survival horror game. But I think that trying to have CULTIC toe the line between those, I'm kind of glad that it landed closer to action than it did to like straight up horror. I think that wound up being more enjoyable for this particular genre.
Okay, for our next question, I know we've been bringing up level design a lot, so we'll get on that pretty soon here. But first, how did you approach boss fights when developing CULTIC? What are some examples of what you consider to be good boss designs versus some bad ones?
Oh man, yeah, bosses are tough because I hate boss fights as a gamer. I like boss encounters, like where you're, like where I don't know the right way to say this. Generally, I feel like in most games, and I'll even use Resident Evil 4 as an example because that's what I seem to always come back to. I feel
Mhm.
like the bosses in Resident Evil 4 are only interesting once. And in most games, I feel like boss fights are only interesting one time. Like the first time you fight the boss, you're like, "Oh my god, what is this thing? What can it do?" And then you know you die a few times, you learn how to kill it, and then pretty much forever, that boss fight is going to be easy,
Mhm.
because you know how to approach it, you know how the strategy to get through it. And so from that point on, it feels like a pacing killer to me. Like when I replay Resident Evil 4, the thing I look forward to the least is fighting the bosses because it's just like, and I imagine like as a speedrunner, this is kind of like, where this part of the game is just a task now. Like it's just a thing I need to get through.
Mhm.
And granted, I know that this is probably a very controversial opinion that not a lot of people will share with me, but that's just for me personally. I always feel like boss fights are just kind of like pacing killers the second time through.
Mhm.
And so if I were making a game purely for myself, I probably wouldn't include boss fights against a single like a big boss enemy at all. I'm more in favor of like the first half of the chapel fight in Cultic, where you're just fighting a crap load of enemies because it's
Mhm.
like you spent the first half of the game so far learning how to fight cultists, like what strategies work, what doesn't work, what guns you like, what guns you don't like. And so a boss fight should challenge you to use the skills that you've learned to overcome a very large challenge. And a lot of times, I feel like boss fights are so gimmicky that everything that you've learned they throw out the window. Like especially in games where you have like some kind of really powerful weapon that like absolutely messes up enemies, and then you fight a
Mhm.
boss like, oh yeah, they're immune to that weapon. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
they're immune to all of your elemental effects. It's like, okay, like it would be more interesting to me to fight a ton of enemies at once, like put me in a really difficult situation against things that I've already been taught how to fight, rather
Mhm.
than introducing something new that can kill me in like 1 second. I don't know, for me it just doesn't click. So designing the bosses in Cultic was kind of like, I want the cultists to mostly be the focus of them. Like for once you're in a situation where the cultists are coming to you rather than you being able to decide how you start each fight. Because for the most part, playing through Cultic, most enemies aren't aware that you're there, and so you kind of get to choose how you're going to start the encounter. And that was like a big part of the encounter design in that game. And so survival mode kind of showed how frantic the combat can be when you don't get to choose that.
Mhm.
And so the boss fights was kind of just like, let's turn this around on the player. Like we've given you all these opportunities to learn the combat and to kind of choose how you approach it, but now we're going to send all the enemies to you, and this is going to be, now you get to test all these skills. And then the boss itself in those scenarios is more so just like a thing you need to deal with while also dealing with all these cultists, rather than it being like this big tanky enemy that you are going one-on-one against. But as it turned out, people didn't like that. A lot of people did not like the bosses in Chapter 1, which,
Mhm.
this is a lesson you learn. And so then it's like, okay, so now we have to find a balance between what I like in boss fights and what other people want. And so the boss and interlude was kind of an attempt to bridge that gap. Um, and then that kind of turned it on its head. Like some people really liked that boss and thought it was way better than the Chapter 1 bosses, and some people didn't like it. So it's just like, well, I guess I just don't know. I don't know how to please people. So I would say bosses are tough for me. Just like trying to design a game in a genre that you don't really click with. I'm not really like a big boss fight guy, so designing them is difficult. Um, so I'm hoping to. I've got Chapter 2 so far has 3 boss fights in it.
Oh.
I think that'll probably be it because I don't want to do any more. But I think people will enjoy those quite a bit. I'm trying to bring the best of both worlds from the boss fights I've designed so far. So hopefully those will be a lot of fun. But I think the biggest thing for me is having those weak points in the boss fights, where like once you know about like certain exploits and certain weak points, you can get
Mhm.
through the boss fight quickly, which I think helps the issue that I have where boss fights feel like pacing killers,
Mhm.
where you're just like waiting around for phases to happen, or just slogging through doing all this damage. But all of the bosses in Chapter 1 and an interlude, in some way or another, have a way that you can cheese the fight. Like like chapter like the tank has its weak spot, that's kind of like secret weak spot, and then
Oh yeah.
the final boss has weak spots, and then interlude has the coffee pot exploit, which is a lot of fun.
Oh,
Which I don't even know how many people know about that.
I don't know about it, but Could you tell us?
Yeah, so in Interlude, I introduced a prop that's like a coffee maker that you can find in a few different places in the police station. And there's usually a coffee pot either on it or nearby. And if you put the coffee pot on the coffee maker, it starts to heat up. And after a while, it starts to steam, like you can hear it like bubbling and steaming. And the longer you leave it on there, the hotter it gets, and it deals burn damage proportional to how long it's been sitting on the burner. And so if you start the map and put a coffee pot on the burner and then like run the entire map, and then right before you fight the boss, if you go back and get the coffee pot and then throw it at him, it takes out like 2/3 of his health right away. It's kind of incredible. It deals like 2,500 burn damage at maximum. So that's always really fun. I thought that was such a fun little exploit.
I'm gonna have to go do that myself.
I just saw somebody mention Frog Monster in the chat, and I'm actually really good friends with Frog Monster developer. And it blows my mind how he's able to design bosses so well. Because I think Frog Monster has like 30 some odd bosses in it. And I can't design a boss to save my life. And then like him and I would just be chatting, and we'll chat on Discord during the day while we're both working, and he'll be like, yeah, I'm just making another boss, and he hasn't done it in like a week, and I'm like, how do you do this? Is it possible to learn this power?
Yeah, personally, I really like the boss in Interlude. In fact, it was really amusing. I was setting up dynamite, and he tried to shoot me with a cannon, and it hit the pillar and like set off all the dynamite and finished him off.
Oh, that's funny. The Interlude boss has a lot of exploits. Like one of them that I think is really funny is when he fires up his machine gun attack. If you slide into him and crouch right at his feet, he just shoots himself because he has this like really big like capsule collider for his body. But because he's so large, the offset for where his bullets spawn is actually like several meters in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're crouched like right at his feet, then he fires the bullets backwards, and we'll just sit there and shoot himself. It's so funny. And stuff like that, like it's easy to fix, but like I don't know, it's so funny to discover. And that's another thing I think that I brought over from Resident Evil 4 being one of my favorite games, is that almost all of the bosses in Resident Evil 4 have some kind of like, either intentional or not, some kind of hilarious exploit that like once you learn it is like, for me, it's more gratifying. Like when I'm playing, like if I'm like playing Resident Evil 4 and my wife is watching me play, it's way funnier for me to it's like way more fun for me to go into the El Gigante boss fight and do the tree glitch where he forgets how to like pick things up and just be like, yeah, see, he's an idiot, now he can't pick any trees up, than it is to like go through and do like, oh, watch, I'm gonna kill him without taking any damage. I don't know, the exploits are just so funny. So I don't know, stuff like that's always kind of humorous. It's just like why you can stack up dynamite and blow the tank up with one shot.
Yeah,
it would be so trivial to make that not a thing. Because I did that with the final boss. Like if you try to stack TNT in front of the rib cage, he flings it away.
right.
But it's like once someone's discovered, it's like, oh, that's so funny. Like I can't get rid of that now.
So now we finally get to the level design. So similar kind of question with the bosses. How do you approach their design, and what do you think makes good level design versus bad ones?
I don't know. Like I'm not really a pro at level design. It all very much just like is kind of flying by the seat of my pants. Which is part of the reason why I brought Nick on to help me out with level designs in chapter 2, because Nick is really good at blockouts, and I suck at blockouts. Because like one of the weird things I do with when I'm doing game development is when I start a new project, I always want to like have the artwork or the general like artistic style of the game. I like to have that down first, because I like to know what the game is going to look like at the end. I'm always kind of chasing this like I want to be able to have an idea of what this is going to look like when it's done. And so level design, I struggle with doing blockouts, because for me doing like that gray boxing, it doesn't really do anything for my brain. Like I want to see what this area is going to look like when it's all decorated, and make sure that's going to feel good, versus just like like level flow, which is what you would get from doing a blockout. And so building maps for me, I spend so much time trying to be like a perfectionist of like like I can't be like, oh, I want there to be a building here, and I know I want it to be roughly this big. It's more like I'm like, well, where do I want the entrance to be? How many rooms is it going to have? Like, what's the roof going to look like? Where are the windows going to be? Like, and I get so hung up on all of those details that 2 days later I still haven't even like built the building because
Mhm.
I'm so worried about like what the end result is going to be. Whereas Nick just like, I mean, he's so fast like when it comes to blocking maps out and kind of like conceptualizing where the player's going to go. And so it's been great having him around to kind of help me pass that creative block that I have.
Mhm.
So level design for me is just usually I have a general idea of what I want the player to do in a map. Like how are they going to get from A to B? And what set pieces do I want the player to get through along the way? Like just taking like the very first map of CULTIC, for example, I knew
Mhm.
that like in that map I wanted to have the little like holding center, the little place with the little prison cells. Um,
Mhm.
I wanted to have the harvester's lair, his little cave, and I wanted to have like a big like canyons shootout area. And then
Mhm.
those are like the three set pieces I really had in mind. And then you just kind of build everything in between them. And then sometimes you find more opportunities for set pieces. Where you're like, oh, that would also be cool. So I'm gonna add that too, like the little cave system in map one that has like the little water area and like all that
Mhm.
stuff just kind of like comes along the way. And it's honestly the level design has pretty much just carried on like that. Um, and a lot of it is just kind of like, man, we were in chapter two. There was a map that Nick was working on called Old Town, which is kind of like it's basically like the old city before New Grandwell was built. And so it
Mhm.
was supposed to be like this old like Wild West looking town that's abandoned, and it was supposed to be like really early in the map, like or really early in the game, like the third map.
Mhm.
Um, and it is now in like the later in the second half of the game because like map three it was like, well, how do we get to Old Town? It's like, oh, it'd be cool if the player went through like the swamp area, which I've showed off a lot of the swamp area,
Right.
and the swamp area wound up being so dang big that it was like, well, this is just its own map now because it's already like half an hour of gameplay. um, and then it was like, well, now I have to figure out how do we get from the swamp to Old Town. I was like, oh, we could do like this other place that you want. And so it kept being like, we'll have this one set piece and then you'll go to Old Town. And the set piece wound up getting so big that it became its own map. So we pushed Old Town back a map. And then the next set piece was so big it became its own map. And then we pushed Old Town back a map. And so just like stuff like that keeps happening too, which is always really funny. Um, but yeah, but to answer your question about like what makes for like good and bad level design, I don't really know that I'm good enough at level design to comment on that, but I would say like universally, the biggest thing is just like signposting. I find is
Right.
super important.
Mhm.
Just like having a feeling of where you're supposed to go in a map without being like explicitly told where to go. And obviously
Right.
like it's a lot easier if you're making a game that has like a compass and an objective system where you can have somebody who calls you on the radio and they're like, you have to get this gate open, and then you get an objective that's like, open the gate, and it shows you, you get a little objective marker. And but
Mhm.
if you can't do that, or if you're trying to design a game that doesn't have that, then you get into like that the yellow paint debacle of like how obvious do you want your signposting to be, because you
Mhm.
don't want people to feel like they're being because like the best signposting you should feel like isn't happening at all, like people don't even notice it's happening.
Right.
You just create things that like kind of naturally draw the player along, and that can be really hard. And that's what's so funny during like I would say QA testing, but more so for me was like watching people play the game on stream, or like when I went to Gamescom, watching people play the demo. And people like players just do things you would never expect them to do, and like players get lost in ways that as the developer, you like never think about. Like I had no idea that people would get lost here. Like the biggest example for me is the in map two in chapter one, getting down into the boat, where you have to like there's like a so in the original version of that map, the vent grate in the floor that you have to drop through
Mhm.
wasn't really signposted at all. It was under the table. It was kind of hard to see, but it was like, well, you get into this boat and there's nowhere else to go. So I figured that people would kind of scour the rooms. But as it turned out, people would get onto the boat, they would kill those few cultists, they wouldn't find a way forward, and then they would immediately jump off the boat and go check out the mines area, which of course is locked.
Mhm.
Um, and they would forget about the boat. They would just, oh, I guess that's all I can explore on the boat. Um, And so it was like, okay, well that sucks. Like, how do I get around that? And so I moved the table so the vent grate was exposed. There is a trail of blood leading into the vent grate, and there is a television that's turned on that's casting light directly on it. And I was like, okay, this is like as neon sign as I can get of telling people go in the vent. And people still miss it all the time. Granted, not as long as they used to, but it's just something that people overlook, and I think that comes back to the old gamers can't look up adage.
Yeah.
Which somebody said in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
People don't look vertically a lot when they're playing games, which is so funny because like you hear that thrown around a lot, and then to find out how true it is. And that's something that's still there in the game. Like I haven't gotten rid of that vent. I think all of the signposting on it now, people are like, oh, where's that blood trail go? But people would just like skip it entirely, and they would get so lost. And it's like crap. And it's like, how do you fix that? Because I've already set the whole boat up. Like I can't really change the routing. I mean, I guess I could get rid of the barricade on the stairs, but I like that barricade there because it's a big piece of environmental storytelling. Because there's something below deck that the crew doesn't like, so they barricaded it down there. And that's a big part of the build up to that particular set piece. So signposting is hard. The map I'm working on right now, the kind of like the Renaissance Fair thing that I've been teasing on social media, I have no idea how people are going to navigate it. I'm very interested to see when I send it off to be play tested how people do on that map, because I don't generally think that maps in CULTIC that the levels in CULTIC need a map, but this one is like it's very close to needing a map. So like there's a lot of things going on to lead players around and signpost them, but I'm entirely expecting it to be a thing where people get lost completely, and I'll have to go back to the drawing board and make it a bit more linear, just because it's so wide open. It's like, hey, you can explore this giant place, have fun. So we'll have to see how that pans out.
So next question, speaking of environmental storytelling and signposting, another thing some games like to do, especially in games in the build engine, they love to make references. Like you even have that Evil Dead reference in CULTIC's first level in the cabin where it says groovy. What are some of your like favorite references in gaming, and can we expect more of it in Chapter 2?
Oh man. I can't really think of any of my favorite Easter eggs off the top of my head, to be honest. But I mean, like I've always enjoyed all of the ones in like finding the Doom Marine in Duke 3D. Like when people are making like kind of friendly little jabs at competing games, I've always thought those are really fun. But like as far as doing Easter eggs myself, I don't know. I really struggle with placing Easter eggs and references because I'm always like I don't want to like insult the developer who made that game by like when I put the soap in CULTIC, which is obviously a Dusk reference.
Right.
Like I don't really know Zemansky that well, and like his the New Blood is their games are in a way competitors to mine, and see I don't know like if I put this thing in here just because I respect this person, I respect their game, and I want to make a little funny reference to it. Like I don't want to insult them. I don't want to like not do justice to their game. So it's just like it's one of those weird little like anxiety things of worrying about like, am I going to get in trouble for this? Is the developer not going to be happy about it? And so I tried to limit the amount of those that I did kind of to ones that I knew would be safe, like like the groovy reference, like that's Evil Dead's been referenced so many times. I know I'm not going to get in trouble for that, and so I kind of been trying. I kind of tried to keep it more to things that I knew were either safe or I know the developer of that game in some way, and so I feel more comfortable making a reference to it. Chapter 2 does have a few Easter eggs in it, but not like a crazy amount. So I wouldn't expect it to be like an Easter egg fest, but I would say it's probably pretty comparable to Chapter 1 and how they're sprinkled around. But Chapter 2 just has like more stuff to like look at and interact with in general, just because the maps have so much more stuff in them, that hopefully their presence won't be missed, or rather their lack of presence won't be missed. But yeah, I mean there's still a few.
What was the response about the soap anyway?
I mean, I never got in trouble for it. And I don't really communicate with with Szymanski at all. So I don't know if he liked it or hated it, or if he even knows about it. But I mean, like in general, I think players who people who like Dusk thought it was a fun little reference. And it's a fun item to throw around. So it was just kind of done out of a place of respect for that game and that developer. So that's it's like hopefully I know that I personally would not be offended if somebody put a CULTIC reference, and like Phantom Fury had a couple of CULTIC references, and I thought that was so cool.
Oh yeah.
Because like people who worked on that game would just like, one of them would be like, hey, just so you know, I'm putting a little CULTIC Easter egg in this map, and I'm like, are you serious? That's so cool. It was really fun to find those. So I mean, like for me, that really tickles me. And so I would hope that for other folks, it's it's kind of the same. But one of these days, I'm sure I'm gonna unwittingly insult somebody with an Easter egg, and then I'll feel bad about it, and then that'll be the last Easter egg I ever put in a game.
I think one of those was during a boss fight. There's like a TV screen or something that says "Buy CULTIC." I think was one of them in Phantom Fury.
Yeah, there's like an office setting where there's like a small little like dialogue rabbit hole. There's like emails on a few computers that keep referring to like an event where like everybody at the office was playing CULTIC, and like nothing was getting done, which is pretty funny. And then I think there's like TV screens in the city that have the CULTIC logo on them. It was just so cool. And it was it was really neat to see that. But yeah, no, it was that was definitely fun. And just like outside of Easter eggs, even just like seeing CULTIC in any like mentioned anywhere is still like I mentioned before, talking about the game's level of success. Is just like it's surprising. Like when Bolt Gun came out, a lot of the reviews, even like like article reviews, quote unquote, professional reviews, were comparing Bolt Gun to CULTIC, which I thought was weird, because like from what I've seen, the games play very differently. But I guess it was more so just like the color palette and the vibes people thought were really similar. But it was weird, like people are praising Bolt Gun, but they're like, oh, if you liked CULTIC, you have to play this, and that was cool. Like seeing your game being used as like a benchmark for quality was that was neat. And so like I don't know, it's always cool seeing your work referenced in other places, because it just means that people know about it. And so that's just, but it always surprises me when I see it mentioned, and so to see it as an Easter egg in another game even is even more surprising.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be more callbacks to it. So next question. What is your biggest takeaway working on your side project Bone Rooms? Can we expect more like it in the future?
Yeah, I talked about this a bit when on my last the last podcast I did with Thomas Brush. I talked about this a bit, and I made a lot of people really mad. So I'm gonna try to approach this more tactfully this time. I was really surprised by how badly Bone Rooms did when it came out anyway, and just because as a CULTIC's the first game I've ever released, and it did way better than I was expecting it to. And so you get a little bit of a following off of that, but I never really considered how specific my game dev following was to CULTIC. Like when you have however many followers on social media, you kind of expect like, oh, I should be able to get that many sales out of a game, and that's not true at all. It turns out. Which I'm sure if I had asked anybody who actually knew anything about marketing, they would have told me that. But it was just like a fun little side project. Like hopefully it gets a few laughs. It was just like a little Halloween thing. But I was kind of expecting it to maybe get some traction. But it just just kind of came and went, which is fine. But that was definitely a lesson to learn. Was like your following or the success of one game is not indicative of the success of another. Just by virtue of it existing does not mean that you're going to capture the same audience again. And so that's that's been a really interesting thing to think about in terms of what I work on after CULTIC. Like, do I'm so burned out working on retro shooters right now, but if I switch to something else, I'm probably going to lose a big chunk of that audience, just because this is the genre they're interested in. And So that's been something interesting to think about. I mean, Bone Rooms was a ton of fun to work on. It was a ton of fun to test. I mean, like you got in on some of those testing
Yeah.
sessions. I still believe in it as a game. I'm hoping that the update I'm working on for it, where I'm going to make it just like a free game instead of having a very small price to get in, will hopefully allow people who have picked the game up and don't have anyone to play it with. Will at least allow them to send it to some of their friends, and then they can get their money's worth out of it, because it just, there's so few players that a lot of people who bought it have had no one to play it with, which sucks. Like, I feel really bad about that. So I'm hoping that even though it was only like a little $2 game, still, like, those people didn't get, like, anybody who buys CULTIC is going to be able to boot it up and get the content that I intended for them to get, because it's single player. You only need you. But with Bone Rooms, like, the experience is all about having a handful of people to play with to experience the deception and like screwing each other over, like all these tools the game has for kind of creating a bit of like a social game in that manner. And if you don't have anyone to play it with, you lose out on all of that. And so, folks who bought the game and there were no servers up because so few people are playing it, and they just didn't get to experience it at all, and that stinks. So, but yeah, I would say just like Bone Rooms was a really good marketing lesson, and just like how important it is to understand your audience. And so yeah, it was very sobering to see that kind of just come and go without much fanfare. Of course, until Smitty played it, and then suddenly, this guy with 8 million subscribers on YouTube plays it, and then suddenly it's getting, like, you know hundreds and hundreds of people are picking it up every day, and it's like, oh crap. Well, now I don't know what to expect. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And yeah, the chatter, Forsen also picked up Bone Rooms, and I think Forsen let randoms join, which was extremely interesting. And actually crashed the game on stream because he had so many people trying to join him at the same time. Which of course I have no way to I can't test what it's like when 400 people try to join
Yeah.
your server at once, so I was not expecting that to happen. But
Yeah. Yeah, there was only a handful of us that including me, who tested it with you. I don't think we, even with your entire Discord server, we would have been able to break it.
yeah, no, I think in all of our tests, I think we only had a full lobby twice, and that was that was with me running my laptop and my wife's laptop at the same time as like fake players. But yeah, no, multiplayer is interesting. Multiplayer is an interesting beast to tackle. Just because, I guess, I don't know, there's so many multiplayer games out there that if you don't have an audience, then there's nobody to play with, and therefore nobody can experience what you've intended for them to experience. And so that was a tough lesson to learn, and something I'll definitely have to think about if I try to design co-op games in the future. Just like how many people don't have a standing pool of other co-op players to play with. So yeah, no, it was interesting. I'm definitely glad it was a side project that I didn't spend any money on, because it would have been devastating to have had that been like something I spent a year of my life on and then have it fall flat. So no, it'll be a good learning experience. Hopefully something I can carry with me moving forward.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to some more general questions now. What keeps you motivated to work on your games?
Well, the real core motivator is money and being able to keep my bills paid. Because at the end of the day, like, unfortunately now, I did quit my full-time job to work on game dev. So the biggest thing keeping me going is, like, it is my career now. So if I want to keep paying the bills, I've got to keep doing game dev. But outside of that, like I don't know, it's just like game dev is fun and engaging, and we're like working on CULTIC right now and doing like the content grind of just like grinding out maps isn't like my favorite thing in the world. But I love my community. I want to do right by them. I want to make sure Chapter 2 comes out and is the best it can be. But I'm really itching to get back to working on like new projects and being able to explore new ideas, because for me that's what really keeps me going in game dev, is like being able to try new things and like explore these ideas that I have. And largely with CULTIC, that phase of CULTIC's development is over. I'm because the gameplay has already been established with Chapter 1. I'm not changing the core gameplay loop for Chapter 2 at all. I'm trying to keep scope under control by not introducing anything huge, any crazy new things. And so the part of game dev that's really interesting to me, like the exploring and the learning, and like that part for CULTIC's kind of done. Um, and so it's kind of hard to keep on task. That's that's why I worked on Bone Rooms, and why it was nice to work on such a smaller scope project. Um, but I mean, yeah, just like the thrill of like, oh man, what if I did this? What what would that look like? Like, would this be fun? Would that be fun? Trying out all these new ideas and seeing how they pan out. Is I don't know. It's just it's super interesting and engaging to me, and I hope that I hope that it continues to be something that pays the bills too, because that would be great to continue doing it full time. But I mean, the biggest thing right now is just like it is what keeps me afloat. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a real motivator to get up and get to work when when the mortgage is looming. That's a real good motivator.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, it's just like I don't know, just the thrill of creation. Like most, I'm sure any creators or creative folks out there can understand that. Like when you get that idea that you just have to explore, like you have to stop what you're doing and put it on paper. Whether that's
Mhm.
somebody writing music or wanting to try, getting a painting out of their head and onto a canvas. Like it's so fulfilling. It's fulfilling and exciting, and that's honestly like all it really takes is that thrill of discovery, and it's a little bit scarier when it is also your lifeline, because I don't feel like I can just explore any idea that comes to my head now, because there's also, is it going to be financially viable? Will people buy this? Is it something I can do solo? So the days of wanting to dive into like, oh, I should try making my own Minecraft, like you do when you're just a dev screwing around.
Yeah.
Some stuff like that, it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't mess around with that, because even if I did make my own, it would be fun learning how to do all of that, like voxelization and world generation. But at the end of the day, like, is it going to be something that will people buy it? Will I be able to, will there be a future with this? And sometimes the answer to that's no, and so that has to be something I don't spend a bunch of time on. And that prioritization is necessary, but sometimes kind of stinks.
Mhm. So earlier in the interview, you mentioned a game maker. So
Mm-hmm.
what I want to ask is, what sort of games came out of Game Maker? What did the early days of Jasozz Games look like?
A lot of sprite games, a lot of games with sprites that I did not make. Probably like, let's see. So I think I started using Game Maker with Game Maker 4 or 5, one of the two. And that would have been in like, gosh, 2002. It was a long time ago.
Mhm.
And that was pretty much just like downloading Metal Slug sprites or Super Metroid sprites or whatever game that I liked. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make my own that game. And so, like you do like everybody, you download Link to the Past sprites and you're like, I'm going to make my own Zelda. And then you start messing around with that. And that was what it looked like for a long time. And then probably in like middle school, which for me would have been like 2006, I started messing around with doing my own sprites, just like dabbling in paint, and like I was like, oh, I can do this. That's no problem. And then you learn that it is a problem. It's very hard. It takes a lot of practice.
Mhm.
Um, and then let's see, around high school, like 2008 or so, I started animating in Flash. I figured out how to export sprite sheets from Flash, so I was doing like hand drawn sprites in Flash. And I pretty much kept trying to learn pixel art until so around I would say around the time I started like animating in Flash and doing my own pixel art, so probably around like 2006 2008 was when I started doing non get me sued games, or it's like actually making original games using my own original art. And I stopped downloading and using music from other games and all that, all these things that because around then I started to realize if I ever want to sell these games in the future, like I can't use art from other games. Like you learn about all those copyright things. And then so it wasn't until like 2016 that I finally decided to make the leap to 3D and to Unity. Um, so I think the like the Hemoglobin 2D project and then Dungeon Break, which are both on my my Jasozz itch.io page, those were my last 2D projects. And so you can kind of see like that's pretty much as far as my pixel art ever got, which wasn't phenomenal by any means. And that was about the extent of what I could do in 2D, and I just was really itching to like everything I wanted to work on was a 3D game, but I just didn't know how to do it. So I finally took the leap, started learning 3D modeling, and started learning Unity and learning C Sharp and so on and so forth. And so that was around 2016 that all that started. But yeah, no, it was a lot of sprite games and nothing that was really viable. But it was fun, it was fun just like tinkering and
Mhm.
and kind of learning what goes into making a game. But yeah, none of that stuff I could have ever sold without getting sued because it was using other people's art and other people's music and so on and so forth. So um, yeah, it was fun though, man. I really miss Game Maker. Like I really, obviously I'm not going to switch back from Unity,
Mhm.
but it prototyping things in Game Maker is so fast. Like it's so easy, and I kind of miss that, like being able to spin up a game prototype in like an afternoon. Um, just because it was so simple, and I'm sure I could do the same thing in like 2D Unity, but I don't know, like it's getting like pixel perfect games in Unity compared to Game Maker, which is designed for 2D games. It's just like it's night and day. It's a huge difference. Like Game Maker was so cozy. So I don't think I'll ever go back to it, but man, I do miss it sometimes. I do miss that, like working on a nice small cozy 2D game. I don't know, maybe someday.
So, what is your greatest gaming accomplishment?
Like in game dev or like as a gamer playing
As a
other
gamer,
games.
as a gamer,
Oh man,
yes.
I don't know, dude. I'm a terrible gamer. I am so bad at so many games, and I don't know what to blame it on. Because like I feel like when I was younger, like when I was a kid and playing the games, I feel like I would pretty frequently play games on harder difficulties and had no trouble getting through whatever game. But as an adult, like I don't know, I have so little free time to play stuff that I find a lot of games nowadays really kick my ass. Like it took me so long to get through Elden Ring, and I had to use so many summons and so many exploits because I am just not good at video games. So um, I don't know. I mean, I have some pretty impressive Minecraft binges in my lifetime. Some pretty nice like 18-hour gaming sessions here and there. But I don't know, man. Like I haven't. I'm not really a leaderboard, chart topping gamer. I'm too I don't know how you speed run. I can't do it. It makes me so nervous. The idea of like throwing a run because of one mistake freaks me out so much. I could never do that. So yeah, I don't really know that I have like a big gaming achievement. One time I won a Lego set from a yogurt lid. That was kind of cool. It wasn't gaming related, but it was an achievement. That was kind of neat. A Dan and yogurt giveaway I won. Well, I pulled a winning lid. Like I won like a third place prize, which was some like big like Lego City set, and then I lost the lid, so I never got to
Oh
redeem it.
no.
Yeah, that was one of my greatest failures. I guess not really an achievement then, huh? So yeah, I don't think I have a good answer for that. Unfortunately, I can't really think of anything that I have done that spectacularly. My Steam library is kind of impressive. My backlog is pretty impressive. That's there you go. My achievement is probably my gigantic Steam backlog.
I don't know, man. Sometimes those uploads you put on your social media, you're just styling on the game. You pull off some impressive shots.
Well, what you don't know is that that's like it took like 34 recordings to get that shot. No, if I post a if I post a clip on CULTIC of me pulling off some really nice shot, take a look at the ground and see how many dead cultists are laying everywhere,
Yeah.
and that'll be a good indicator of how many tries it took to get that shot.
So, similar question. What is your most embarrassing gaming moment that you're willing to share?
Um. Oh man. Oh, that's easy actually. So I feel like on most podcasts we wind up talking about like Doom 2016 versus Doom Eternal, and that's always a fun thing. So I don't like Doom Eternal. I think it's a great game. I think everything about it is great. But it doesn't click with me.
Mm.
Doom 2016 I loved. It being more of like a slower paced, horror focused kind of experience versus Doom Eternal's like more arcadey style. Doom 2016 really clicked with me. But
Mm.
the first time I played Doom Eternal, I hated it. Like I was like, I don't understand this game. It doesn't make any sense to me. The ammo system is terrible. Like I am constantly out of ammo. Um, and so I put it down. Like I was like, I'm done with this game. And I didn't pick it up probably for like another year. And then the second time I gave Doom Eternal an honest effort, I realized that one of your pips of chainsaw fuel regenerates automatically. I did not know that the first time I played the game. I somehow completely missed the messages that are like, "Hey, by the way, your chainsaw always regenerates," which makes the game a lot easier when you can chainsaw enemies to get ammo back.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, that was like, oh man, that was a huge, like, I don't know how I missed this. It's like a core part of the gameplay.
Yeah, right.
But I guess some of that was probably just my 2016 experience coming through of like, I'm used to this being a limited resource, so I didn't expect it to regenerate like that. But just like completely missing that was really embarrassing. I don't know how I missed this like gigantic core part of the gameplay. So that was pretty sad. I would say that's probably in recent memory, probably the most embarrassing thing. Of just like completely missing this like core gameplay thing. And when you replay it, like the game tells you it over and over again. So I don't know how I missed it every single time. I must have been too busy being sad that I only had 2 shotgun shells and I just couldn't bother to read the text that was on the screen.
Yeah, that's one of those games. I enjoyed the base game well enough, but the DLCs just didn't vibe with me at all. Felt like it doubled down on limiting player freedom, like introducing enemies that had to be killed a certain way, and just because one weapon mod wasn't being used, like that kind of stuff just rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, like it was frustrating because like I pre-ordered Doom Eternal. I was super hyped by the trailers. I like took off work to play it, or no, I don't know if I took. I played it like the second it came out. I was ready for it. And I remember like spawning into the starting area, and the very first like shambling zombie you fight, you can't punch him to death. And I was like, uh-oh, this isn't good. And then like the first weapon you get is like a big spinning rotating power up. And I was like, oh no, like this is not 2016. And so that, it really, I don't know, but it sucks because like I love everything else about the game. I love the visuals of Doom Eternal. I love the music. I love the audio design. I love the weapon designs. I love the enemy designs. The set pieces are awesome. Like but it's just like it just doesn't click with me, and it's frustrating because it's like I want it to, like I want. And when I played Doom Eternal on the easiest difficulty, just because I was like, I'm gonna get through it. Like I'm just gonna get through the game. I paid for it. I want to see it through. So I just turned the difficulty down, and I had a great time. Like just because I could run around with a shotgun like I did in Doom 2016 and kill everything, which is what I want to do. And I recognize that Doom Eternal is not designed that way. And that's fine, but for me, like I don't want to have to do all of this like hot swapping. I don't want to have to remember 16 different enemy gimmicks to remember how to kill all these different enemies. It's just not my style of game, which again doesn't make it bad. Obviously it's a great game and people love it, but that was like for coming from Doom 2016, it was so hard to click with that. And so but yeah, no, it was definitely interesting, and it seems like anytime we get on the topic, it's always funny seeing like what kinds of people are and aren't Doom Eternal players. Like people who really like 2016 because of like the narrative focus and like just kind of the more grounded design of everything, and then the people who get more into Eternal because like we talked earlier about games like Ultra Kill that are just like super fast and super challenging, and you kind of get onto this. It's like this spectrum of whether you are playing a game or whether you're expected to perform for the game. Like am I playing or am I performing? And for me, I like to play games. Like I want to relax. I want to just enjoy myself. I don't like the people like people describe playing Doom Eternal on the hardest difficulty as like, oh my, like I was shaking and sweating and it was so tense. And I'm like, see, I don't want that experience. I don't want to shake and sweat when I play games. I just want to have a good time. But that's fine. That's the same reason why like most Souls games don't click with me, because they're too hard. They're too hard for me, and I don't have the free time to like get really good at them. And that's okay. But anyway, yeah, no, that Doom Eternal chainsaw thing, man, I felt really stupid when I figured that out.
The other thing you could add on top of those things you listed off about its overall design, I think one thing that really stood out to me was its optimization, how just smooth it played on PC. You can crank up the settings. Yeah, you can crank up the settings and it's like you had no frame loss.
Yeah, that id tech is wild. Well, the fact that Doom Eternal ran on Switch is crazy. Like, how did they pull that off? I struggle to get CULTIC running at 60 frames per second, and then like Doom Eternal's here just like running on a freaking Switch. I don't get it. That's insanity.
All right, so this is my last question for me. What other indie projects are you looking forward to?
Um, that's a good question. Let me just go look at my Steam wish list because I know most of them that I just like. Um, God, I have so little time to play games anymore that my backlog is ridiculous. Like about the only thing I seem to find time for is like, I like jump into Fortnite or Phasmophobia or something for a couple hours with just to like one of my friends is on, I want to play with them, I want to catch up with them, and that's like, and that's like, well, now I need to go clean or I need to go to the gym or I need to do this or that. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of sad. So I feel like when I do get really hyped for a title, I have to throw it on my wish list or I'm gonna forget about it. I really want to play Creature Keeper.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that I've been watching for a long time. I thought it was like dead, because I hadn't seen anything about it, and the dev started posting it. But it's like kind of like a like Link's Awakening esque top down RPG. But you can like befriend and tame a lot of the enemies, including little skeletons, which I really, of course, I love me a good skeleton. So I really want to play Creature Keeper. I'm really intrigued by Mouse, the like, Walt Disney Mickey Mouse looking shooter, not just because it has a C96 in it, but because when it was initially revealed, it had a lot of really similar stuff to CULTIC in it, which not like like they're copying me, but like oh, I like all these things because I put them in my game, so now I want to play them in this game. Um, but that one I haven't seen a lot of just like concrete gameplay for, so I'm kind of like holding my breath on that one. Really hoping that it doesn't wind up having the art style be the only hook, and that I think I don't know how indie it is, but I really want to play Kingmakers. That looks really interesting. The one up where you're like fighting in giant medieval battles, but you have like a truck and a shotgun. That looks really interesting to me. Sunset Devils is one that I backed on Kickstarter that I think is really cool. It reminds me a lot of like the old Game Boy Advance Medal of Honor Infiltrator game. It's kind of like a top-down Western shooter with like it has a really good art style and really good colors. I would say those are probably the ones I'm looking forward to the most. God knows when I'm gonna have time to play them, but those ones all look really fun.
Some of them I haven't even heard yet, or
Sunset
heard
Devils
of before.
Sunset Devils really interests me because it's got you have to like it's a Western game, and so you're using old West guns, and you have to like cycle and load all of them manually, but it's all done on like when you're reloading, it's like mouse wheel up and down cycles the chamber, left click loads around, right click removes around, and it's kind of hard at first, but eventually you kind of get into that like muscle memory rhythm where reloading is really fun. And it feels really good to pull off like a really fast action hero reload, even though it's kind of like playing like hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades in VR, like pulling off a slick reload, but you feel like you did it yourself. It wasn't just like I hit a button and my player reloaded. It's like, no, like I did it myself. It feels very nice when you pull it off, and very bad when you screw it up because then you get shot. But yeah, no, those are all ones I'm looking forward to.
I'm gonna have to make a note of some of them. So that's all my questions, and this is the point where I would like to open up. If chat would like to ask anything. I know in your server I told people to prepare some questions.
Yeah.
So
I think what I'm really waiting for, I've been playing a lot of while I wait for questions to come in. I've been playing a lot of Crab Champions lately too. I'm really looking forward to more content in that game. And then just really hoping that Phasmophobia gets a new map ever. Like any new content would be great. I don't know what. It's so weird, like that team. I know it was such a small team, but like the rate that content comes out for that game, because I think they have like one artist, and they're doing, instead of using assets for everything like they did before, I think they're doing a complete 180 to where they make everything by hand now. And so like every new map is like 100% handmade assets, and so it takes so long. And the maps look great, but it's like, man, I don't care if they look great. I just want to play maps. I want new maps to play.
So, first, only question we got. Zoob the Mad asks, "Do you need a VA or a writer?"
No, I don't. I probably should have a writer, but I'm too stubborn to hire one. I'm gonna keep learning. I'm gonna keep learning how to write and try to do better of my own volition.
The Dark Shadow Rage asks, do you think of making a shooter in the vein of Quake or Quake 2? Do you like the movement in those games or the gunplay?
I probably won't. To be honest, like I'm not like a huge retro shooter guy. I played a lot of build engine games growing up, and so I have a soft spot for those. And then but like CULTIC was really based more on like Dark Forces 2 and then like Resident Evil 4 were the two like major motivators for like gameplay and combat design and movement and so on and so forth. But you know, games like Quake doesn't really click with me. I don't have a problem with Quake. I didn't really play it growing up, so I don't have like a nostalgic spot for it. And then playing it as an adult, it like doesn't really click with me. And so by extension, games that are looking to emulate those games don't really click with me. And I since I don't understand what makes Quake click for people, I don't really think I could make a game like that. You know, and I think there's people who have already, you know, who understand that better, who are better suited to make games in that vein. So yeah, no, I just I'm not, you know, it's the same reason why like I'm not trying to make any of the like super fast paced shooters like, you know, like Ultra Kill, because like I don't really understand that gameplay, so I don't really think I'm well suited to make a game like that. Or like Doom Eternal. Like Doom Eternal A kicks my ass, and B like I don't really click with it, so I don't really think I'm the one to do that. But I think Cultic's probably going to be my first and last dabble in retro shooters for a while, because I'm burned out on that genre. You know, I've basically been like living and breathing a retro shooter for almost 4 years now. So I think it'll be time to move on to something else for sure.
Okay. Still gonna give a few moments if anyone's got any last questions for Jasozz.
Sure. Oh, what have you been playing lately, Wesley?
Well, despite it being a PvP game, which the older I get, the less I want to play those because I get too angry. I get roped into playing Marvel Rivals actually.
I love the art style in that game. Like I haven't played it because I'm not a PvP guy, but like I'm blown away by the character designs in Marvel Rivals. They're so well done.
Mm-hmm. And I ended up being a raccoon or rocket raccoon main, so I'm the support guy who sits in the back and tries to keep everyone else alive.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I honestly like with games like that. I wish I were more into PvP stuff, because it looks so cool. But about the most PvP I can do is like
Rooms.
yeah, like I play a little bit of Hunt and a little bit of Fortnite, because that's more like just kind of, it's like that battle royale format where you're just kind of like 80% of the game is just running around with my friends and looting and exploring, and then 20% of it is actually fighting and dealing with other players. So it's kind of like a nice balance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. No, I pretty much, I think like half of my friend list on Steam is constantly in Marvel Rifles right now.
Yeah, it's been blowing up, doing really well.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Well, Jasozz, I really appreciate you stepping in for Kaiser on such short notice.
Sure.
It's been great talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to always be supporting CULTIC ever since I started speedrunning it to up till now. So
I appreciate you, and have always enjoyed having you in the community and breaking my game. It's always fun to see somebody take 2 years of your work and turn it into a 7-minute speed run. That's always fun.
That's the ones who do out of bounds stuff. You know, I'm not about that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it'll be. I'm honestly really interested to see how speedrunning Chapter 2 looks because the um the environment design has changed a lot for restricting out of bounds. And so I'm interested to see how this. I am sure that they will find a way, and I'm intrigued to see what they come up with.
Right, like the comment you made when you showed off the swamp area. I was making reference to, you know, Souls games. I was like, all right, where's my resist gear and what items do I need to reduce poison buildup? And you just said it would just kick boost over everything.
Yeah, yeah, probably. It never fails to amaze me. And someone's like, "Oh, you can flush yourself down this toilet and get out of bounds." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Of course you can. Of course you can do that. That's great."
That is still gonna be one of the most amusing exploits.
Yeah, it's a fun one. Good old void flush.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being here, Jasozz. I don't know how to wrap this up other than, yeah, I think we'll let you go off, work on CULTIC more or relax, you know, whatever you have planned. And I'm gonna switch over to gaming. I'm gonna play a bit of CULTIC myself. Probably give Interlude another play because there's some stuff I just like the coffee bot I didn't know about.
Yeah, yeah. Enjoy. I am actually getting back to work on CULTIC. So, but yeah, no, it was great. It was great being on. I appreciate all the questions, and it was fun chatting with you.
Hey, take care.
You as well. Talk to you later.